What up, YouTube? Today we're getting started on putting the 460 back together. Getting started by putting the crankshaft back in. Stay tuned, because here we go. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step of the engine rebuild. I hadn't put the oil galley plugs back in. There's also a couple of coolant drain plugs on the side. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but this one's frigged up real nice. I don't know how that happened exactly. And the threads are a little bit screwed up as well. So I've got this tap and die set here, brand new from Harbor Freight. The metric and standard version comes with all of that. And then, so we're going to be putting in the oil galley plugs with some sealer today. We're going to put in this one here. There's one right here. There's also going to be, I'll turn the light on for you. There's two more right here. And then there's also two on the back side that go into these two holes here. And then if you look up the kit for it online, it doesn't actually include this one, but this is technically an oil galley as well, and we need to replace that. So mine I had to drill out, so it's no good anymore, but thankfully it's the same size as one of these other oil galley plugs from the rear. These flat wide ones go in the rear, the tapered ones go in the front, and then another flat one goes in the very front on that spot I just showed you. And then these tiny ones here go in the top. And since we got one of these screwed up, I found out that the small ones actually fit in the same threaded hole as the coolant drain plug. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these two brand new oil galley plugs as the new coolant drain plugs because they're new and shiny. Unfortunately, they're not the correct ones. They're not going to look like this, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter, and it's also something that can easily be swapped out later for the proper one if I can find it. But this one's unusable, and I'd prefer that they both match, and I'll probably hang on to these for now. I'll keep them in the glove box or something. So that's what we're going to do on that. And then the front plugs, since they don't match anything, we're going to go ahead and use the new ones on the front plugs. And then these new plugs, one of them is going to be used on that front plug that we just looked at because I don't have one for that. Then the rear plugs are actually going to be the old ones. And then the top plugs are also going to be the old ones. I hope all of that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and use this thread sealant with PTFE. Supposed to be good against oil and against pressure, so I'm going to apply some of that to each of these, and then I'm going to go ahead and install all of them. So I'm not going to put that sealer on the coolant drain plugs that go on the side of the block, which I guess I didn't show you those. This is one of the holes for a coolant drain plug, and this is the other hole. I am not going to put that sealant on those. I'm just going to tighten it, hope that it doesn't leak, because the thread sealant it's not thread locker, but it makes it much more difficult to remove again. These are designed to be removed from time to time, whereas the oil galley plugs are not. Alright, so we got all of those plugs in. Front two oil plugs, side oil plug, top two. Got the rear two. So now we're also going to be painting the oil pan from black to blue like it's supposed to be. Alright, so I went ahead and sanded off all the spots that I had paint on that I didn't want paint, and blew it off a little bit. I guess I forgot the oil filter here. I'll get that too. And then I'm about to take these main caps off, and we're going to put the bearings in place, and then we're going to put the crank down and get ready for plastigauge. Alright, so I've gone ahead and taken the main caps off. And I've cleaned out all of these areas here where the I guess the top bearings are going to go. So now I'm going to go ahead and put those in place. Alright, so we got our new bearings installed, at least the upper ones. The thrust bearing goes in the center. Make sure everything's flush. Looking good. Alright, and now the crankshaft is back in on top of the new bearings. So next thing we're going to do is go ahead and put a piece of plastigauge on all of our main journals, and then we're going to clamp down the main caps again and see what our measurements are and compare them to factory spec. And also I got a factory Ford service manual coming in the mail, so we can actually get the proper specs directly from Ford. Alright, we got our oil sump out and nice and cleaned up. Here's the old oil pump and the hole that it went into. I believe it was roughly at the 2 o'clock position. If you're looking at it like this, just torched the shit out of it, and then we grabbed some rags and tried to move it. That didn't really work, so I took a dead blow, very lightly tapped down, lightly tapped up, and then just kind of loosened it like that. Sorry, I needed all my hands to do that, so I didn't film it, but I did at least want to kind of go over that. There's plenty of other videos on YouTube on how to take care of this, because I watched them myself to get this out. But I did want to go ahead and throw that in the video in case you're at the spot on this engine and you want to get this out. Just heat it up real good, tap it lightly with the dead blow hammer. Alright, so on this camshaft thrust plate, I had this installed already. You're supposed to check the clearance between the front of the block and the top or the outer edge of the cam bearing, and it needs to be pushed in a certain amount but not pushed in too much. I tried to check that, but unfortunately my feeler gauge doesn't have that high of measurement, but I think that it's pretty damn close if it's not exact. And I didn't install the cam bearings, the machine shop did, so if there's any issue with that, you know, we'll have to deal with them on that later, but I actually think we're pretty good on that. So then I put the thrust plate back on, and I tightened those two bolts to 10 foot-pounds, and I used an inch-pounds torque wrench and put it to 120 inch-pounds, so that way we have a more accurate setting there. And then I put the tiniest amount of Loctite on them. I don't want these to be impossible to remove again later, but if this thrust plate comes off and it sends the camshaft out the front of the engine, then that's a catastrophic failure right there. So the next thing we need to do is go ahead and put on the cam gear, and then we need to check the camshaft end play with a dial indicator. Alright, so we got the cam gear on, bolt on, and the fuel pump eccentric on. There's a little spot, you can kind of see that little groove there right behind the fuel pump eccentric. It is clearly offset. This part right here is a pretty symmetrical circle that goes around the center, and there's an offset circle kind of cast into the gear there that it's pretty obvious how this eccentric is supposed to go on. It is flat on the back. There's nothing that actually locks it in other than the bolt itself. So it's very important to use some red Loctite on there. And I did go ahead and tighten it to 45 foot-pounds. I just put an extension through here against the block and held it in place so the cam couldn't move, and tightened it down that way. So now we're going to do an end play check. Alright, so here is our setup for the main bearing clearance, or excuse me, the camshaft in play, and we've only got about 1/1000th there, and it's 1 to 6 thousandths is the spec, so that's more than good right there. Alright, so now that we got our camshaft in play figured out, the next thing that the Ford service manual wants you to do is go ahead and put the rear main seal in. So I did that, and I've got the rear main seal and bearing installed here. For whatever reason, it says to put the rear main seal in before checking the bearing clearance, so I'm just going to do it by the book. It's probably going to be alright. So now what I need to do is clean up my other 4 caps. I got 3 of them here, 1 of them here. I got to clean those up a bit, put the bearings on them, put some plastigauge on each bearing, and then we're going to set them down and torque them. Alright, so we got all the main caps cleaned up with some brake cleaner and wiped off. Then we put the bearings inside. Alright, so I've cut off a piece of plastigauge, roughly the width of the journal, and Ford says to place it about 1/4 inch off center. So I'm going to go ahead and put the cap on here, and then we've got to do another one on this journal, another one on this journal, another one on this one, and one on the rear. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Alright, so we got our plastigauge measurements done. This is pretty much uniform across all of them. It's 1.5 thousandths, which is within spec. According to the specs I have, it's 0.5 thousandth to 1.5 thousandths. We're right at that end of spec at 1.5 thousandths, but it is within spec. And everything here is brand new. Crankshaft's been polished and the bearings are new, so I think that we're good. And we do actually have a stock replacement bearing. So I'm going to go ahead and clean all of this off. And then we're going to go ahead and lubricate each journal with some assembly lube. This stuff right here is what I'm using. And then once that's done, we can tighten down the main caps for good. Alright, so here's our rear main cap. We got a rear main seal in there. Ended up getting a different one. I had the Viton one or whatever, and it seemed like it was sticking up too far on both sides, and then I lightly tightened these bolts down, and it seemed like it went flush, but I didn't like, it wasn't really sitting flush on the back side, and I didn't like that. So I got another Felpro one that's not the Viton, and it's still stuck up a little, but once you kind of lightly tighten it down, it kind of squishes it down into place. This one's a little softer, I think. So I think this one's going to work. I hope so, because otherwise that'll be a giant pain in the ass later. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put some RTV on this back edge here, as well as on this side, and then I'm probably going to put a dab here and a dab on the part that sticks up on the block. And then I've already got the number 1, 2, and 4 caps installed, so I'm going to put that back one on, and I'm going to torque all of these down, and then I'm going to do the thrust one last, because that's what it says to do. We got to set the thrust here, and I've got grease on the upper and lower bearing of all of them, so we're going to go ahead and move on. There's our RTV setup. Alright, so now we got our rear main cap, our 4 main cap, our 2, and our 1 all installed, torqued down, grease on the bearings. We got our rear main seal in. We got our RTV on there, which I'm going to wait for this to cure, and then I should be able to just kind of rip that out as one piece, and it should have no effect on what's underneath the cap. Same on this side. This side I did okay. I think I might have overdone it just a little bit on this side, but that's alright. Once that cures, which shouldn't take long at all because this is the right stuff, it's very good, probably less than a day, and I'll be able to pull that off. And so the next thing we need to do is set our thrust, and so we got to put our 3rd cap on last. Then we got to do some pry bar action and get the crankshaft set in the right spot. Alright, so I didn't film this, but I'll explain what I did. I don't have a helper with me here, so it'd be very, very difficult to film this without a tripod. And I have one, it was just easier to go ahead and do it. So I'm going to explain exactly what I did. So I put this 3rd cap on, and I put it on only hand tight. Then you want to make sure it's still flush at the bottom. Sorry, my light just went out because my camera battery's dead. I'm screwing up everywhere. So anyway, You want to take a pry bar and pry the crankshaft towards the front, and you can use these counterweights in the block to do so. Then you want to pry with a different pry bar, pry this towards the rear, and that's going to align the thrust bearing. You push the crank to the front, push the cap to the rear, but you're really not moving anything because it's hand tight. All these are torqued down already. So once you do that, it says while prying forward on the crankshaft, go ahead and torque these bolts down to spec. So I've got every main cap bolt torqued to 100 foot-pounds now. Then it says to re-pry the crankshaft back towards the rear. So I've done that. Now we're going to go ahead and hook up a dial indicator on the rear. If you watched the other video I recommended for the end play on the crankshaft or the camshaft, where we did the dial indicator video, you probably already saw this, but in the event that you didn't switch and watch that video, you're going to see us use the dial indicator on this to check the crankshaft end play. This is the back and forth movement of the crankshaft. It needs to be within a certain specification, so we're going to be hooking up the dial indicator and we're going to be checking that next. Alright, so we got this set up here for the crankshaft end play check. So it's about 1 notch to the right of 0, and if we go ahead and push it forward, we get about to the 5 mark, so that's 4 thousandths. And then if we go over here again and pull back, we're like right on the 0 now. We can get it about 4 in either direction. So it's, you know, accounting for any slight inaccuracy of, you know, this thing moving around a little bit. I'd say it's got about 6, 7, 8 thousandths, something like that. So the spec for that is 4 to 8 thousandths. So we may be towards the higher end of spec on our end play, but I think that since we are still in spec and everything's new, I think we're good to go. I don't expect this crankshaft to run off on us. So that's the next step here, crankshaft end play. All right, now that everything's done, our crankshaft can rotate in place. And it does seem to be rotating relatively smoothly. So I think we're going to flip it over and start checking piston rings. And that's going to be the end of the video for today, guys. Stay tuned. I got plenty more footage coming together for this engine. I'm actually quite a bit farther ahead than what you guys have seen. I just have to actually put the clips together, so stay tuned. Those videos are coming, I promise. Otherwise, go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you like these Lincoln videos. Leave a comment below if you're working on one too and you have any questions, or if you just think it's cool and want to say so. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button because that helps me out quite a bit. Otherwise, check out one of these other videos and I will see you on the next one.